I love to see some repeat performances on Launchpad TV today, so that's good. We didn't bore you last time.
People are eagerly awaiting this.
Eagerly awaiting.
Yeah.
I mean, no J-Lo, A-Rod interviews today. We've got some good substantive content. So welcome. You're
Chris.
And I'm Ann. And this is Launchpad TV. And we are so excited to welcome y'all today. That's my fake New Orleans accent for you. We are broadcasting here from Healdsburg. Grateful to have internet, just FYI. We lost our internet yesterday at the house. So we have, for those of you who don't know, have a fantastic service of what we call satellite. And so we pay the top fee that we can. And just yesterday, we hit our max capacity on satellite internet, which makes for working and doing and just general anything at home that's not analog pretty difficult. You probably are thinking we're at the end of the month. You know, it's obviously March 31st, so it probably rolls over tomorrow. Nope, we're going to be having no internet until April the 15th. Yeah. So think about us.
Well, we are super grateful for our co-working space here. Reminds us how important having an internet connection in office so we can keep LPTV going and keep the business going. Speaking of keeping Launchpad going, you know, hoping everybody is doing well. We've got a lot to cover today, and more clarity on some of the loans and grants and things that are coming out. So we're going to get into that in a little while. Yeah, Maddie, I'm representing today.
Representing Stockton.
Stockton.
Many of you know, Stockton was our newest, although it feels like we can't even say it's new anymore. Maddie, you've been around for almost a year, and through a pandemic. So that's exciting news for you over there in Stockton. And we are grateful to be honorary Stocktonians. We hope we earn the name. So I did want to just highlight and welcome to our community today. Last week we met with some independent co-working operators from across the country, and we've invited them to join, and they can obviously get access to the resources here and feel free to share them. But I just wanted to say grateful to have you as honorary members of Launchpad Nation. We had a lot of fun. We learned something from each other, and we're really excited to support entrepreneurs and co-working spaces across the country during this time. And any resources or things we can bring to your members, we'd be really delighted to. And one thing, I mean, I think we continue to navigate during this new normal. We continue to navigate how it works for our business. We're obviously going to spend a lot of time today talking about some of the great resources that are out there. I'm excited to introduce our friend, Catherine Lyons. But before we get there, I wanted to shout out, a huge shout out to the Launchpad community. Without you guys supporting us through this time, we won't be there at the end of it. And this week marks sort of March 31st. We've been getting there. Just a reminder, our rent's due on April the 1st, which is exciting, and no relief in sight. But we wanted to be thankful and grateful to you, our community. We were able to, because of your support, offer 30 Launchpad members relief during this time. We've given 30 Launchpad members a break on paying their fees for the month of April. And that is a real recognition of the support of the rest of the community. Several of you have had economic hardship when you responded to our survey and have shared the impact to your business. And even more of you have said, regardless of the impact, you're still there to support the community, and you've still found it in your resources possible to continue to support us during this very confusing time. And so we are grateful to you. We promise to pay it forward when we come back online, and we're all back together in our locations. But we really, really couldn't do it without you. And so you've made it possible for us to sleep a little bit better at night and not want to kill each other every single day. So thank you very much. The hard reality is, as we all know, small business is being hit hard. It's being hit fast. The impact of this pandemic is right straight at us, and relief is not obviously going to be immediate. So one good news, bright spot for us today, is it seems like the SBA loan website's been getting better.
It's been getting a lot better. It's gone through 3 different versions in the last week, but somebody's working hard and working fast there. So yeah, are you ready for me to show that?
Not yet,
okay.
not yet. I want to tell them why
showing.
they should watch through your segment to wait
Okay.
to the final segment.
Okay.
But nonetheless, we've submitted our SBA loans now 3 times. So if anyone wants to compete with us on that one, hopefully they don't do an iteration tomorrow. But Chris is going to walk us through all of that. And then we're going to talk to Catherine Lyons. And Catherine Lyons comes to us from the Economic Innovation Group in DC. But she is a New Orleanian at heart, and actually an OG Launchpad Nation member.
Yeah.
And so now she is also a total policy wonk, and you want those guys on your side.
It's good to have friends in high places.
That's right.
Or a Launchpad Nation,
That's right. That is right. And she spends her time on Capitol Hill advancing essential policy moves for small business. We've been working with Catherine for the last year around opportunity zones, and she has been getting deep on what the relief is coming through the SBA and various things, and she's going to be giving us a lot of heart, a lot of soul, and dropping a lot of knowledge later in the show. But before we get there, Chris, talk us through our resources.
All right. I am going to share a screen here and bring that up while we're talking. There's been a number of things that have popped up over the last week, and one of the things I want to encourage anybody watching to do, if you have a resource, pop it into the chat, share it with your community manager, email it to one of us so that we can share it out. This comes from Chris Bakunas, who is one of our Newark members. Some of these are local incentives, but there is a grant from Invest Newark, which is up to a $10,000 grant for small businesses based in Newark. So if you're a Launchpad member and you are based in Newark, you probably qualify. We'll share these in a link after but Invest Newark, if you go to that site, is specifically obviously around COVID-19 impacted businesses. Also want to share, City of Stockton has an entrepreneurship grant available. This is something that predated COVID-19, but they've extended the application period. So the application period now is through May 21st. So if you're an entrepreneur in Stockton, California, this is something to consider applying for. Also wanted to highlight here, if I can get to it, the state of Tennessee has just introduced a crowdsourced platform with a quick response time for various opportunities, business opportunities. This could be things like 3D printing companies that are able to, make face shields, or some of the manufacturers that are making masks, other recovery aspects, but they're promising a very quick turnaround. The state reviews expect to be answered within 24 hours. So the state of Tennessee has launched.
Is that like a government 24 hours?
I don't know. We'll see. Tennessee's pretty on it.
I love it.
So if you're either in Memphis or Nashville, this applies for you. Something launched in New Orleans is GNO Pivot, helping businesses if they have the ability to create products and services that are helpful during this time of crisis. Obviously, some of the distilleries are starting to make hand sanitizer. Scale, one of the co-working spaces that focuses on 3D printing and manufacturing. There's people making face shields there, so G&O Pivot is an option there. This is a national opportunity, a platform called Alice, which is a small business resource platform.
Founded here in Healdsburg, California.
I didn't know that.
Yes, Elizabeth Gore.
Well, that's great.
Here you go.
They have a $10,000 grant that's being distributed immediately to small business owners. Verizon, Silicon Valley Bank, Amazon is all sort of behind this. I don't know how much is available in terms of funds, but hey, folks, these are the types of things that we would encourage you to get on as quickly as possible. And again, these links are going to be up afterwards. And then last but not least, something you've heard us talking a lot about, the SBA website is working. I've got a live application here in process that I wanted to show everyone. We've been doing our applications. As Ann said, we've submitted a couple different ways, and the website went from unusable and totally crashing last week to working and a relatively streamlined and speedy application. If you have your sort of information about how it impacted your business and your revenue and your costs, it took 15-20 minutes to get through the application. But what I wanted to highlight here, if you can see the screen, is I would like to be considered for an advance of up to 10 grand. I have no idea how they're going to be making that advance decision, but what we did learn today is that today is the last day to apply for the $10,000 advance on your loan. So anybody who hasn't done this yet for your small business would encourage you to apply. Once again, this is what's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So this is the type of thing that the SBA offers after all disasters, Katrina, various things. This is not the PPP yet, the Paycheck Protection that passed as part of the CARE Act. That you're going to have to go through your local banker through. But we're encouraging folks to apply to both. Obviously talk to attorneys, accountants, lawyers, people who can give you good professional advice here. But our understanding is that today is the last day to apply for this advance. So I want to encourage people to do that today. So those links will be available after the show in the blog post we put up after the show. And we'll stop the screen share and come back to live.
Amazing. And I think, Chris, you've got a poll going. Did we get a poll going?
Yeah, let me start this poll. I want to see who has...
Uh-oh. Yeah. Should have been LPTV4.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't know how to use the polls for the other thing. I have a question. Can we add to the poll while we're here, or doesn't happen?
Next Thursday, you're gonna get it in Thursday. As
we preview Catherine, one of the things that we were chatting with her about was she was like, well, you just contact your banker or who provides you with the loan. And I was like, yeah, a lot of us don't have good relationships with our bankers as small businesses. Something that we learned about, and a lot of us don't have a lot of debt on our business. So guess what? Maybe we should have before. So maybe for the next pandemic, let's make connections and really build relationships with our bankers. But nonetheless, let's move on and introduce Catherine.
Okay.
While we're pulling up Catherine and getting it was interesting. We met with some guys from a co-working space called Betamore last week. And it was pretty cool because what they were saying was they were able to, one of their members has been able to organize support and relief things through their existing platform that was organized around sort of soccer practice and organizing soccer practices. And so the whole idea of G&O Pivot is really cool because it gives you the opportunity of being able to think about how to use your business in a new way. So that is exciting. Any business can be applied that way, and any concepts, right? Because you've got that operational efficiency. So everyone should be digging deep and thinking how to apply their business, no matter what it is, to helping organize for relief and support here. Catherine.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you all doing?
We are
Good.
doing
We're
good.
doing well. You hanging in there, staying as healthy as you can, and sheltering at home right now?
Yes, we are officially, DC just got the order yesterday to shelter in place or stay at home. So I've been doing that already, but now it's official.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So Catherine, for today, I think, did you want to do a quick intro? I've got some questions from our audience already,
Great.
but we do a walkthrough, and when you're ready to go to questions, I'll ask you the ones that we have, and then other folks can feel free to enter their questions in the chat, and we'll navigate that with Catherine. So take it away, Catherine.
Great. Well, as I said, thank you so much for having me and Economic Innovation Group. It's been great to work with Launchpad through EIG, at least over the last year. But as Anne mentioned, I've actually been working with kind of Launchpad and Chris for 10 years now, since I lived in New Orleans doing AmeriCorps after Katrina. So it's I love this full circle that keeps bringing us back together. So we've been working on opportunity zones primarily, but obviously with the advent of the coronavirus crisis, Economic Innovation Group, which is really focused on promoting policies to help entrepreneurs and small businesses grow and thrive. We have taken kind of a role in this process of providing much needed relief to small businesses in light of this public health and now kind of corresponding economic crisis. So to that end, we've put out a couple of things recently. One, we authored a proposal for a emergency small business lending facility that we hoped would inform the process of the phase 3 negotiations and discussions, which we believe it did. Though we'll still be continuing to push for some of the provisions that we think are would be part of a really successful small business lending program, both for the survival of small businesses, but also through the crisis, but hopefully also just the ability for them to continue to grow and thrive in the hopefully resulting recovery. But what we've also done is, in the light of phase 3 passing on Friday, this is the CARES Act. Sorry, phase 3 may be more of a DC lingo, apologies there. But the CARES Act is what passed on Friday, and what is included in that, kind of the cornerstone small business provision, is this Paycheck Protection Program. So we wrote a blog about that and the details of the program. And again, we can circulate that maybe afterward. But I will caveat everything that I say right now in that there is still not a lot of guidance on sort of the operational aspects of PPP, this new loan program. What we are hearing is that loans will be available starting on Friday. We're still awaiting some guidance from Treasury, especially related to additional lenders that can be part of this program and initiate and administer loans. And so Treasury and Secretary Mnuchin has indicated earlier this week that the loans would be available starting on Friday once that guidance has been released. SBA had also said that they were going to have more information up on their website on Monday. It is Tuesday afternoon. That is still not there yet. So while they have made vast improvements for the economic injury loans, apologies there, sorry, my notifications. There has not, we have not made a lot of progress from SBA in terms of providing additional guidance on the Paycheck Protection Program. So still awaiting that. We are hearing that that will come soon. So, but obviously sooner the better, as time is of the essence. So what I figured I'd do right now is kind of just go through the basics of who is eligible, the terms of the loan, etc. And then talk a little bit about what we hope to see next, because what we're already anticipating, as there are continued talks now of phase 4 or phase 5 negotiations related to coronavirus, especially as this may continue on for longer than was anticipated, we're already anticipating that this is not going to be enough to help small businesses weather this storm completely. So that's where our organization, being a bipartisan research and advocacy organization, which I'm not sure I said that up front, that's kind of what we are. And so being that, we're aiming to be part of those negotiations and discussions with key offices that will further this relief and bolster the relief for small businesses. So on that point, I would also just encourage everyone who's participating to please let us know what you need. It's always helpful to have that evidence, even if it's anecdotal, to learn what small businesses are really facing right now and what is needed in terms of a federal response. So that would be extremely helpful. Very much welcome your feedback, both through this medium or afterward as well. And I can definitely provide my contact information. So, okay, well with that, I'll kind of dive right in. First, this Paycheck Protection Program, which is a new loan that will be administered by the SBA, though of course, really the kind of main entry point here are lenders. So either those that you may have a relationship with already, although as Anne said, perhaps that's not the case, but either way, hopefully community institutions, community banks that at least you're familiar with will be able to be eligible to grant these loans as well, and not just kind of going outside of the normal SBA lender network that's traditional, does the traditional 7A loans for small businesses. In terms of the businesses that are eligible rather. So they determine small businesses, or generally define small business as less than 500 employees. Though for industries that are a little bit different or more nuanced, there is a kind of an applicable size standard that the SBA provides guidance on, and that is on their website. So just depending on what type of business you are, and if you're in a specific industry, that may be a different size standard that applies to you. I know for the vast majority of people on this call, you would be eligible as a small business. And that so eligibility shouldn't be as much of an issue here. This also does apply for nonprofits too, I should mention as well. So that's 501c3s and 501c19s, which generally apply to the same size standard as well. In terms of, with regards to like what exactly are these loans, what can they be used for, size of them, etc. So the maximum loan size is $10 million, or it's really the lesser of either $10 million or essentially 2.5 times your payroll costs. And so this is determined based on if you were in business all of the last year, most of last year, then it's 250% of your average monthly payroll costs, between February 15th and June 30th of last year. If you were not, then it's based on the period of time that you were in business this year. And you do have to be in business starting February 15th in order to receive these loans as well. In terms of determining payroll costs, this is an interesting thing that Anne and Chris and I discussed yesterday when we were talking about this call, is that it really is just payroll costs. So this will be helpful for that, but other obligations such as rent or things like that are not calculated into the appropriate loan amount. It's more focused on compensation, payments for vacations, payments for insurance, healthcare benefits and insurance premiums, taxes, retirement benefits, etc. So that's how you calculate your payroll costs on a monthly basis, and that of course will help determine the appropriate size of the loan. What the costs that are not eligible for payroll are compensation over $100,000. And then, so I think that's kind of the most applicable, I think, potential, aspect that would not be eligible. I'm sorry, the problem with the Zoom call is that I have to let my cat out, excuse me. The joys of working from home. In terms of, where can this be can this be applied? Where can this be used? So it's, of course, eligible to cover payroll costs, but it has more broad usage than that as well. So that includes, healthcare benefits, employee salaries, payments on interest on any mortgage obligations, rent, utilities, and any other interest on debt obligations that were incurred prior to February 14th as well. So there generally is, even though the loan amount itself is calculated based on payroll, there is broader applicability in how it can be used. And one other thing that we discussed earlier as well that I think is important is that you can kind of layer additional loans. So if you are applying, for example, for the Small Business Economic Injury Disaster Grant, you may use that for a separate purpose. So as long as you're not using the same loans for the same thing, you can use them together. So you can use this for your payroll, the Paycheck Protection Program, but then you can also use the Economic Injury Disaster Grant, or loan rather, to cover your rent or other obligations as well.
Can I jump in there? And that's a really crucial point that I want to see if we can clarify. The nuance of the PPP was that the loan amount is 2.5x your monthly payroll, but the forgivable amount isn't just payroll, it's forgivable for things like rent and utilities. Right. So it's potentially forgivable for more than you can get the loan amount for. So my understanding, I want to just see if you can help me interpret this. Yeah. My understanding is if you apply for both, for the economic injury loan and the PPP, and like you said, you use them for different purposes, that the forgivable amount can be increased beyond the amount of the PPP to include part of the economic injury loan that you might use for rent or for utilities for other costs for business. And I don't know that there's clear guidance, so I don't know if that you have a definitive answer for us, but am I headed the right direction there?
So the forgiveness of the loan cannot exceed the amount of the actual PPP loan. So it's forgivable up to 100%, but it's not more than that. So the forgiveness kind of qualifications or aspects that have been laid out for this PPP program, it's not available, or you cannot exceed the amount of the loan itself. So that is. Yeah, that's the case with that. And on the forgiveness piece generally, because I can kind of talk about that as well. So the forgiveness piece, you're right. It can cover up to 8 weeks from the date of the loan origination, 8 weeks of payroll, mortgage interest, rent, utilities, etc. And so that is kind of the amount that can be forgiven, but there are some qualifications around that. You essentially have to retain the same salary or the same payroll essentially, or the same number of workers as you had at the beginning of the covered loan period to the end. Now that's for those who have preemptively laid off or furloughed, some of their workers, anticipating the challenge of being able to meet payroll. If you hire them back and so therefore have the same number of workers or the same salaries kind of on your payroll by the end of the covered loan period, you will not get penalized. So you would be able to still get that same amount of forgiveness. So of course that's an incentive to try to rehire for businesses that may have already made the decision prior to this guidance coming out to lay off some workers, and anticipating some of those challenges. Interestingly too, for forgiveness, and I think this is important for, of course, a lot of the service industry providers or workers, tips are also included as wages on the payroll. So anything which may not actually be on kind of payroll. So that's an important qualification as well, or kind of additional flexibility, I guess I would say, for those industries.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions coming in, and Catherine, I don't know if you can see these, but I can see them. I can
Be able to see them on the Q&A.
on the Q&A, yeah.
Well, before we jump into those, we had
Okay.
a few people submit questions in advance. So
Oh,
I
great.
want to raise those up because we are grateful for you submitting questions in advance.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to the just-in-time questions on the phone. Ironically, there's some crossover between the folks, but this is a member from NOLA. I'm in the middle of closing on a house, and I don't feel it would be wise for me to try and get another loan at the same time. I also have independent contractors who are not on payroll. I pay them directly and I personally take a draw. I'm kind of feeling like I might fall directly through the cracks. Is there anything I can do around this? I don't think I personally can get unemployment. And I don't think my business can get unemployment. Suggestions?
Sure. So on the piece about not taking out another loan, of course, that's understandable. What I will say about the Paycheck Protection Program is that your loan payments are deferred for at least 6 months and at most a year. So if that is at all an incentive or if that changes the calculus, you would not have to start making any of those payments for quite some time, in hopes that, this passes and things perhaps stabilize and you'd be able to start making payments maybe a year after. So that is one qualification. Another thing that I should mention too is that there is no personal guarantee or collateral required for to obtain a PPP. So that's obviously important. That's very different than how most small business loans work.
That's a big deal because a lot of,
Yes.
the perception around SBA loans is they're complex, they're cumbersome, they take a while, and they're personally guaranteed. So that's a really important point to communicate that they're not personally guaranteed or collateralized.
That's right. Yeah. So that's obviously a big shift from how how the SBA normally operates. So that's important. There's also no prepayment or just generally loan fees at all. So they are definitely trying to lower the hurdles as much as possible to be able to obtain these loans and also to, again, make the payments kind of as further along as they can. And be as flexible as possible to businesses, just understanding the challenges and the stress that they are currently under. I'm also, you mentioned that SBA loans are usually quite complicated. The attempt here is that there should be a same-day loan evaluation so that, again, capital can flow as quickly as possible to these businesses. That is a great goal. I have some concerns about that's the reality of that goal. Just especially because lenders, it's kind of going to be up to lenders to essentially authorize these loans and be able to come up with the resources themselves to do that. So again, I am eager to see how that works in practice, but that is the stated goal of the program itself.
Great.
So, are there additional?
Thank you. That's very helpful. And let's move down. One question we had. I understand that people who did not actually lose their jobs are still eligible for unemployment. Is that correct? And how does it work?
That may be a different part of the CARES Act that is not this particular provision. So I'm less familiar. I spent most of my time reading this section of the 800 or so pages. So I'll be honest that I'm less familiar with the unemployment insurance provisions. So I could get back to you on that or refer you to maybe some additional resources that have focused more specifically on those.
All right, we're going to give the other question relates to unemployment as well. So we're going to give Catherine a break on that. And let's go to the live Q&A. I'm loving the engagement here, guys. So let's start with Brian.
Okay. Catherine, can you see these? If not, I think we can kind of tag team on some of these. Brian's asking about, he already submitted the emergency disaster loan. Great, well done. And he got his confirmation, or does he is he done, or does he have to wait for some guidance and protection with the bank? I think the important clarification here is that these are two different programs. So you've done one of the loans, but the PPP you will need to do separately from this, and that will be done. Well, my understanding is that is going to be administered by local banks, but Catherine, do you know anything different? Is there a chance that this will be done through the SBA website as well, or is it likely to be done through a local banker?
No, that's the intention here is that you can go to your local banker and be able to initiate the loan process. And so, of course, anyone who is an SBA guaranteed lender, which they do have a list of that on the SBA website currently. So, if one of those is within your area, is close by, you can go there immediately. Although, again, the loans probably won't be able to be eligible starting until Friday. And I would imagine banks are now kind of using this time and awaiting guidance to try to determine some of those eligibility aspects and how they're planning on implementing the loans themselves within their own internal kind of structures right now. So they may not be able to answer your questions yet, but hopefully by the end of the week they would be. And again, they're hoping to also expand the number of lenders that would be eligible to originate these loans beyond the normal 7A SBA guaranteed lenders. So that's what we're waiting for guidance on still from Treasury. But yes, the process here is not through you would not apply on the SBA website, is my understanding, similar to how you would, in the way that you just described earlier on the Zoom. And instead you would do so through your bank.
Great, Catherine, real quick on that though, because what Brian's really saying is he's also submitted on the disaster, SBA disaster loan site. Do you know what the next step is there after you've received confirmation, or is that also something you need to connect with the bank on? And if you don't know the answer, that's fine, but just.
I'm not as clear on for the economic injury disaster loans. I'm less clear on the next step related to that. Again, that's just not, that wasn't, I was paying more attention to the PPP program than that piece, but something I'd be happy to look into as well.
Yeah, I think we'd all want to know what happens next.
Brian, let us know when that 10K gets deposited in your account.
Yeah, that'll be the poll for Thursday. Yeah. Has anyone received the 10K? All right, Karen Lee Ryan, can PPP be used to pay full-time W-2 employees, or can it also be used to pay 1099 contractors as well?
That's a good question. I know that, so the legislation specifically points out that self-employed and, sole proprietors are eligible for these loans. But in terms of their inclusion on payroll, that's a good question. I believe the answer is yes, but I would want to check on that. But I do know that, again, sole proprietors, independent, and self-employed individuals are also allowed to apply for these loans directly too.
Great.
Thank you. Let me just, I think that's going to tie to a couple of the other questions that we're getting. The way people pay themselves in businesses is really a key here, whether you're actually on payroll and paying unemployment taxes and paying taxes, whether you take a guaranteed payment or an owner's draw, or a 1099. And so let's see if we can get some clarification on that. I think you just answered it well, Catherine, but I think particularly I'd like to understand that, and why don't we come back on Thursday and see if we can really help clarify that, because I think there's a couple questions here, and that's a really crucial point there.
Right, especially if that's how the loan amount is determined, is based on payroll. Obviously, that's gonna be really important, especially for the smaller or sole proprietorships.
And a lot of businesses and people, Launchpad members, and folks on this call. Probably the majority of their payroll would be themselves if they're a 2 or 3 person business. So this will obviously be much more helpful if people can include their own salaries or draws or however you pay yourself into this calculation right now.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So if we can get an answer on that, then we'll come back on Thursday and share that.
Yeah.
The other question is related to that 100K cap. And I guess the question is your salary not eligible, or are you eligible up to the 100K?
For salary, I believe the way that it's laid out is that for salaries over $100,000, it's not, they're not eligible to be included. So.
Wait a second. So let me just clarify that.
This is, yeah.
So this is because this is a big deal for folks. So let's say you've got, we'll just call it an employee that makes $10,000 a month. So they make $120,000 in that year. Does that mean that you don't get you don't get the 2.5x times that 10K? Or is it that you only get 2.5 times the $8,333, which is 100K divided by 12?
So I'm looking at the some guidance that was put out by the Senate, and it says what costs are not eligible for payroll costs. And it says employee and owner compensation, so including owner here too, over $100,000. So my sense here is that you would take that off of the payroll and calculate payroll costs, the remaining payroll costs.
All right, so let's see if we can. I don't want to confuse, but Anne's point is a really important point. Does the first 100K count towards payroll costs, and then anything above 100K does not? If you pay yourself 120 grand, are you just deducting 20 grand, or are you deducting the first 100? It would seem to me that the first 100 should be, included, eligible, and then anything beyond that, if you pay yourself 250,000, 300,000, whatever, anything above 100K.
Oh God, I'd love to pay myself 300,000.
Yeah, my reading of it is that you just you're not able to get the compensation at all, but that seems a little bit.
Let's clarify that. That's another thing.
That seems a little egregious. So I'm going to double check that because it's a great question, and that would obviously have a big impact for potentially those that are have quite a bit smaller payroll, but are as the owner are paying themselves perhaps over that $100,000 salary. So
that's another important point to clarify. Okay.
Yeah, and this is helpful for us too, because again, these are the issues that, especially in DC, the kind of, again, the operationalizing of all this is sometimes not part of the negotiations or discussions. So this is really helpful for us as well to clarify these particular points and also to think about them.
And I want to highlight that to everybody watching, that this is a great time to actually get your feedback heard through Catherine and through EIG. As you mentioned in the intro, EIG was instrumental in the Opportunity Zone, in the passage of the Opportunity Zone legislation, and also, in advocating for the way the rules were written. So I think any feedback that we have here, this is the most direct path that I know and we have to get feedback into Washington as these rules are being written, and it's all coming pretty quickly. But I think there's a couple points here that we're hearing loud and clear. Okay.
All right.
So here, I may have some additional point on that. I'm sorry, I have a few different tabs open on my computer of various guidance. So I'm going to read this out loud, and hopefully this may be helpful in answering that question. So payroll costs do not include compensation paid to an individual in excess of annual salary of $100,000 as prorated for the relevant period, or to individuals outside the U.S. Therefore, only the salary of an individual employee in excess of an annual salary of $100,000 as prorated for the period is excluded. Does that make sense?
I hear that as your 100K counts. Your first 100K counts.
God, I want to hear that.
What?
We want to hear that.
That's
yes. No, that's good. Okay, so that's hopefully that's the question.
Yeah. All right, Anne, do you want to pick any of these questions? Or
I feel like a couple of these are related to the payroll questions. So Trent, as a sole proprietor, I don't have payroll per se, don't pay myself regularly. I think we're going to come back on that. 2, I recently paid off debt just previous to the outright in anticipation of additional revenue coming in, which is no longer coming in during the virus. How do I factor that into the calculation for the loan? That's interesting. I don't know if you have an opinion on that, Catherine.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, that's well, I think again for the calculation for the loan itself would be again mostly based on kind of payroll and 2.5 times of that. So I don't know if the kind of the revenue / debt payoff, because they're not looking at your balance sheet, they're really only looking at the payroll to determine the appropriate loan size. So I don't think that would actually make a difference in terms of that calculation.
Great. And this is, so from Megan and from the anonymous attendee, it sounds like a common question if you're an LLC member that takes a guaranteed payment. I think
We've sort of said we're going to come back on that.
we're going to come back on that on Thursday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's important to know.
But we'll see. Okay. You're going to clarify that.
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
One I also see here, sorry, I don't mean to, I'm not going to.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Capability. I was just saying, I saw one here that says if you didn't have payroll in 2019, are you automatically excluded? And no, that's not the case. So as long as you were in business on February 15th of this year, and you can show payroll statements from like January 1st through the end of February, that counts. So you do not need to have been in business last year.
Okay, great. Okay, more questions about the draws.
Hey, it's interesting, right, Catherine? It's like, you start to understand that like decisions that small business owners we make,
yeah,
right now we're doing it. And I think a lot of people make assumptions about stuff, just like we were talking, like how many people actually have a lender? I'm like, not that many actually.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, and it's really interesting, and this is why we kind of reach out to you guys to ask and answer these kind of questions so that we can actually be a provider of this input to the folks at EIG so that they're better informed to understand kind of what the impact is when it actually gets into put. And one of the things I would say is that real-time case studies and real stories is actually how a lot of this legislation and feedback gets done. And so that's why we're really grateful to everybody for not only just answering your questions, but also responding to us with your specific use cases, so that we can be a point of filtering that information to EIG so they understand more about the reality on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really invaluable to see how, the interesting part of policymaking is most often how it's actually working in practice, and iterating, based on what we're seeing and hearing, and both where it's working, but also where are the pain points. And so, we have a really interesting moment here too, where there are kind of constant, continuous discussions in DC on providing relief and continuing to do so in the most effective way. So this is hopefully not something we'll have to wait on, for an iteration or reiteration for years to come, which is most often how Congress operates. But instead, we may actually see some kind of real-time opportunities to either expand this, or think about other emergency lending vehicles, and that's where our proposal kind of comes in, and that's what we're going to continue to push, is, a lending program on a much larger scale, at favorable terms, potentially even more favorable than what is being outlined in this program. So again, we'll circulate that as well, but those are the types of things that we're looking towards is, in the next few weeks, how can we make sure that the relief is actually sufficient? And we have some concerns that this is a good start, but not sufficient yet for what we'll need.
Great. Okay. Let me see if we can do one more clarification here. I think we can answer 2 questions at once, and then I do have sort of a final question, maybe you do as well, but there's a couple questions about the distinction between salary or hourly, basically W-2 employees versus 1099 employees. My interpretation is that both qualify. I think we have a question mark around owner's draws, which we want to come back on. But if it's an employee or an independent contractor, basically W-2 or 1099, both of those would count towards your payroll costs.
That is my assumption as well. I think I don't believe I saw that like distinction in the actual legislative text, and so that may be where some regulations are forthcoming on some of this. But that is also my assumption. I mean, just given the fact that payroll costs include kind of salaries, wages, tips, commissions. I mean that I think that covers a kind of broad kind of type of employee that's not just a full salaried employee. So yeah, that is also my working assumption, but there may need to be some additional clarity and guidance that's issued, in hopefully the coming days, that would provide clarity there.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
And you were starting to touch on where I was going with this. I guess at this point, everybody should absorb this, apply for these, get in touch with your banker or go through the SBA website and identify bankers. I wanted to communicate to folks, if you are a Launchpad member, we are going to begin to recruit bankers into Launchpad through your community managers who can help administer the PPP loans. And so we'll help you try to navigate and build those direct relationships. We obviously won't be directly involved in your application process, but we can help.
Chris is really good at it now. So.
three different times on the SBA website. But Catherine, what should we do? I just want to give you an opportunity to sort of, in addition to, tuning into Launchpad TV, you guys are on the forefront of this with EIG. As additional legislation comes out and relief packages, I think there's a huge question around how long this is going to last, which directly impacts businesses when we're shut down, shelter in place kind of mode, everything from, restaurants that, essentially shut down right away. Some are doing takeout, that kind of thing, to other businesses that might have a little more runway. But if this lasts, it's already weeks, and if it begins to last months in the summer, there are likely going to be other, relief bills. What should people be looking for? How can they follow you, stay in touch on, and sort of, be aware of all of the opportunities that are out there? Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. We are going to continue to put out guidance. So, for example, we put out some initial outlines of what this program looks like, but of course, still waiting on how this actually will work and operate in practice. So we'll likely put out another blog related to that with some more guidance once SBA and Treasury actually release that. So I would say, to stay tuned. We're going to be really active. I think even as we've all been working remotely, we've had perhaps a more active kind of blog, at least, than ever before. So that's one way that we're hoping to disseminate information, of course, on Twitter as well. But that will be one aspect where we'll really be hopefully digging into more of this. And then, of course, as more phases of legislation come out, and as we are part of that process, we'll be continuing to hopefully shape, the federal response for small businesses, and then, of course, analyze whatever is passed, hopefully in subsequent legislation. So, but I think we look a lot at, as an organization, one of our missions is to look at kind of place-based policies and how places are faring. We were founded, actually today is our 5-year anniversary as an organization. And so, we've been looking a lot at the Great Recession and the recovery out of it, and how uneven that's been. And I think as an organization, what we're really aiming for here is to look, at policies that will ensure that a more equitable recovery is what's on the horizon, rather than the really uneven kind of recovery that we've been seeing, or that we saw rather, in the bull market. So, that's just something that we're constantly thinking about is, of course, the immediate crisis at hand and weathering the storm, but then also, how can we ensure that the policies we're creating today are going to places that need it the most, that are going to be hardest hit by this, which not surprisingly are the distressed communities that, are distressed today and remain in a recession from 2008. So what policies can we continue to promulgate that will be particularly helpful for places like that? So, of course, opportunity zones is one example of that, but I think we're going to be thinking hopefully creatively about all of that, in the coming months as well. So always happy to hear ideas, thoughts, feedback on that as well.
That's awesome. And we work closely with Catherine. We're going to invite you back to be on multiple sets. You might be our recurring guest.
We love that.
On LPG.
Hopefully I'll have more definitive answers on some of these too. I appreciate you all bearing with me as, it's been one business day since this all passed into law. So I appreciate you bearing with me on, finding the correct answers for you. I would certainly not want to lead anyone astray. So, but I also appreciate the questions and, again, kind of bringing to light issues that perhaps we hadn't thought about, in some of these situations.
Yeah, and we'll be sure to bring all the questions that have been presented today, Catherine, have responses for them. We'll share the responses on Thursday and likely update any of the blog posts just so that we can have them written. And again, I think this is another thing is that really important for us to be able to come together and to coalesce all these ideas and these impacts and really be able to kind of give this team at EIG sort of like the boots on the ground experience. And that's a big piece of what we're doing. And I think the other piece we wanted to share is for those of you in the Launchpad Nation and across our network who have specific skills and experiences that they can bring around these topics, we also are working on building working groups to basically be able to support our entrepreneurs across the platform. And as you guys know, oftentimes it's really easy to get that help when you're sitting by the water cooler or you're getting yourself some water. Today and for the foreseeable future, we're going to be able to make those collisions and those interactions between other members who've got experience and bring those to the fore for you. So if you've got experience that others will value and you're a member of the Launchpad Network, please reach out to your community manager, and we'd love to highlight and showcase those resources for our members. Catherine, thank you so much. I can't wait to get all your responses. Brian, I see your hand up. We're coming to a close unless it's urgent and you want to really ask a question. I'm going to allow it because it's the first time someone's raised their hand. So Catherine, don't leave us.
Let's bring
there he is, the handsome Brian Zisk. You got anything to share?
I don't know if you have anything, Brian, or not. We're gonna give it a try.
I don't actually. I accidentally raised my hand, but this is a wonderful resource because so much, we're all trying to figure it out. And with deadlines coming and everyone not knowing and, and all the banks trying to figure it out just as quickly as we are, this is really, really helpful to know that, we can come back on Thursday. We got a lot of information today and we're all figuring it out. So whatever we can do to share it, really appreciate it. And I apologize for clicking that button.
No,
anyway,
that's all right.
Good to hear your voice.
Fun to have you in. And we will be doing more of that too. We're going to have some Launchpad members and members of the extended Launchpad Nation on as guests. So who should they contact if they want to be on the show? As always, our fantastic Ariel Behringer, who is our Gelman, if anyone remembers that, but basically Ariel, that's you, Ariel at lp.co.
You can reach out to her with all your programming needs, all your questions for Q&A, all your feedback, if it's positive. And we look forward to seeing you guys all again on Thursday. Oh, do we have a quick fire for the last round? Anything anyone wants to hear?
What's your quick fire?
I don't know. What's the quick fire? Catherine, can you, as our beloved guest, answer? You get to pick which question you answer. Okay.
Oh, like in the Q&A?
Number one, the first question that you can answer, I'll go through three. The first question is, what are you or did you have for lunch that would be inspiring to others? What are you doing for your mental, you don't have to answer them all, mental health and well-being? And what is the most annoying thing your new at-home coworkers have done this week?
Okay, I will answer the first two. So for lunch, I ate, I don't know if anyone has heard of the chef Allison Roman, but I am currently obsessed and cooking very much out of her cookbook all the time. So I made a lemony turmeric tea cake, and then I actually had that for lunch. Maybe it's not lunch appropriate, but I did it anyway. And then keeping,
Yum.
Yeah, it's very good. If I do say so myself, I'll pat myself on the back for that one. This is a new thing that I've actually learned about myself throughout this quarantine. The idea of a dance workout always sounded horrible to me. But recently the Peloton app put out these dance workouts, and I found that I actually quite enjoy them. So there's that. It's kind of fun to like look like a little bit of an idiot, but in the comfort of your own home with nobody watching. So
dance like nobody's watching.
You might have to try that over Zoom.
Except for we don't have any internet. Should we do a dance workout on Thursday instead? That would be amazing.
They're really fun, I have to say. So.
Can we do it on Zoom though for everybody to watch?
Yeah, that may be a different calculus, and I don't know if I would find it as fun if I had an audience, but you know.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Catherine. Brian, thanks for.
Brian has been a watcher from the very first episode. Yeah. If anyone is doing anything out there that they need someone to show up, he's your guy. Brian, you consistently show up for us all the time, and we're grateful for that. And we're grateful for everyone else for showing up.
All the great questions today and engagement. Thank you. And we will see you on Thursday, same time, same place. And this will be posted on our blog, lp.co/blog, by the end of the day if you haven't want to go deeper on any of the conversation today.
All right.
Great. Feel free to reach out too. I'm happy to provide my contact information. Would love to hear any thoughts and feedback too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.